Brilliant. So I'm Eleni. I'm the head of market developments in the market intelligence team at Ofcom. We form the evidence base for all of Ofcom's policy decisions. And as I was very pleased to hear yesterday, a lot of our data is actually quoted at this conference, sometimes incorrectly, so I'm hoping to set the records straight today. But today I'm going to take you very quickly, just to set the scene, through some of our flagship reports that we published this year. The first one being Media Nations, which is the first report that we published looking holistically at the TV market and the TV consumer, as well as our communications market report, which is in its 15th iteration and is our annual statistical fact sheet for all the sectors that we regulate. So I'm going to take you through, if the slides work, hopefully. Sorry, are the slides up? Excellent, brilliant. I'll take you through what UK audiences are doing, then talk you through SVOD take-up, use and attitudes, and then just very quickly touch on revenue, so what that means for TV revenue. I know that the data here is mostly UK, is actually exclusively UK, as Ofcom is the regulator for the UK telecommunications markets. However, I think that there are a lot of findings here that are really mirrored in other markets as well. So firstly, in 2017, the average UK adult spent 5 hours and 1 minute watching audiovisual content every single day. And if you think about how long we're awake and how long we're not working, that's actually quite a long time to be engaged with audiovisual content. Now, the large majority of that continues to come from traditional broadcast content. So this would be live TV, time-shifted TV, and broadcaster video on demand content. We have other components as well, such as YouTube, which is about half an hour, SVOD, which is about 18 minutes, other video, online gaming, etc. Now, what we often hear and what we often say is, oh, young people aren't watching TV, they're moving away, they're doing other things. But actually, this is just not true. So in 2017, 16 to 34-year-olds spent 4 hours and 48 minutes watching audiovisual content, just 13 minutes less than the average UK adult. Not really a huge discrepancy. What is different, though, and this is no surprise, is the composition of that consumption. So whereas we had 71% of all the content coming from broadcast for an average UK adult, that goes down to less than half. So the majority of all viewing for UK young adults happens outside what we call traditional broadcast. The largest component of that is YouTube, with just under an hour every day. Now, you could argue potentially this isn't comparable, as a lot of that is music videos, but it is still audiovisual. SVOD at half an hour, online gaming, which is particularly high for younger male demographics, and other online video as well. Having said that, if you look at the single largest component for 16 to 34-year-olds, that continues to be live TV. And I think if someone told you that you could have the attention of 16 to 34-year-olds for about 1 hour and 37 minutes every day, you'd be quite happy with that type of business. Looking at how that translates to screens, I think we hear a lot about how we're moving to other screens, we're trying to consume content everywhere on the move, and particularly in London, I think everyone just watches everything on the tube as they're commuting into work. But actually, this simply, again, not really true. We tend to prefer to use the big screen. So again, 4 hours and 10 minutes of that 5 hours that I showed you before is watched on the TV set. 3 hours and 30 minutes is that traditional broadcast content that I described. But as the growth of smart TV surges, and in 2018, our data shows that 42% of UK households had a smart TV. And then when you include things like set-top boxes and streaming sticks, we know that over half of all TVs are now connected. You can see that a lot of non-broadcast services are also migrating to that big screen. And if you speak to YouTube, if you speak to Netflix, Amazon, the biggest amount of requests are coming from the connected TV. Now, interestingly, the converse is not true. So broadcast content doesn't really translate that well to other screens. And the majority of all the viewing that happens on mobile devices, on tablets, laptops, desktops, they don't come from the broadcast space. Now, 2017 was a long time ago, and it is December 2018. So we just want to give you a sneak peek of what audiences have been doing so far this year in the UK. And you can see that this is, by the way, live viewing and time shifted by 7 days, so the Barb Gold standard, so slightly more limited to what I showed you in that donut before. But you can see that already starting at the beginning of the year, similar rate of decline that what we saw in previous years. Then in March, you can see a slight departure from that trajectory. And for those of you who were here this year, you probably remember The Beast from the East, which forced us all into our homes and what do we do when we're at home as we watch more TV. And then as soon as that went away, we went back to that decline, that moderate decline that we sort of expected. But then what was interesting in May, that decline accelerated, and it accelerated quite significantly. So we fell below that 3-hour mark for the first time in May, and we didn't really recover throughout the summer, despite the World Cup, despite a really successful Love Island. We remained sort of well below where we would expect to be in an event-heavy year. This is by no means a trend. For those who are happy with my analogy about Beast from the East, we also know it was an unusually hot summer in the UK, and there is a correlation between the temperature and the number of sunlight hours, as well as TV viewing, negative correlation. However, what's interesting is that for the first time, we're seeing declines in viewing, not just in the younger demographics, but actually in the over 55s as well. So again, something happened in May, could be the weather, and all of a sudden the over 55s are watching a lot less TV than what they have in the past. And you can see between 2014 and 2017, they've been fairly stable in terms of the time that they've spent watching TV. It could be, as I said, the weather, but we also know that SVOD take-up among this demographic is also growing. So potentially a little bit of cannibalization as well. Next year, hopefully, we can tell you a little bit more. So moving nicely into SVOD, every year we ask people why they subscribe to SVOD services. And if I showed you this chart last year, you would see that the plurality of people were doing this to take advantage of a free trial or a promotional offer. This year, this has completely flipped. You can see that the messaging of these platforms is starting to resonate. Flexibility is listed really high, watching where and when I want. The original shows, which they spend a lot of money on, as well as marketing, tend to resonate quite highly, as well as the large content of that back catalog that people want to watch when they're trying to think, oh, what else could I be doing? This is all, of course, with the exception of Amazon, where the majority of people continue to value free delivery, one-day delivery, above everything else, although that number has declined from last year. The only other thing I'd like to point to in this chart is the Now TV point. So actually the highest listed reason, not by a lot, was the fact that it was cheaper than a pay TV subscription. So in general, we know that SVOD and pay TV are quite complementary. So if you're an SVOD subscriber, about 75% of you will also have a pay TV subscription. But here we might be seeing a little bit more cannibalization going forward, particularly for Now TV. Our big headline for Media Nations, our flagship TV report this year, was that SVOD subscriptions overtook pay TV subscriptions. And although this is true, and you can see that this is because pay TV has been fairly stable over time and SVOD has been surging, it actually doesn't really tell you that there's a lot of stacking. And this is something that was quoted yesterday at the CEO roundtable, incorrectly. So I'm here to set the record straight. But actually over half of us who have SVOD are more likely to have more than one service. So the most common combination is Amazon Netflix, followed by Netflix and Now TV. And actually 12% of us have all three. So a more realistic picture is this really. So about just under 40% of UK households have SVOD subscriptions. Netflix, by far the highest, and actually Barb thinks that that's going to go up to 10 million by Q4 2018, followed by Amazon and Now TV. Finally, very quickly, revenue. We collect this data directly from the industry, directly from the broadcasters. So this is real data. We also remove inflation. So these figures may look slightly different than what you've seen in the industry because 2017 was a high inflation year in the UK. But overall, a very difficult year for the TV market. After many years of growth, a dip by 4%, and it was a dip really across the board. So pay TV was down due to declining ARPU as well as fallen subscriptions. TV advertising fell to the lowest level since 2013. BBC income allocated to TV also shrunk a little bit, although this is mostly accounted for by inflation. And the only other, this other revenue category, which includes things like TV shopping and content sales, went up slightly because content sales, particularly to international markets, grew quite significantly. TV ad market, very bleak picture, 7% decline, driven very much by a fall in the commercial main channels. So for the first time, I think since we started recording this, it fell below £2 billion. However, what happens normally in the past is that the commercial PSB portfolio channels tend to offset that decline. Now, as that medium matures, we know that it starts to become subject to the same cyclicalities that the main PSB channels are subject to. Commercial multi-channel fell at market rate as well, so overall yielding, as I said, a 7% decline in the TV ad market. Now, we think about whether this is a structural phenomenon, because if it is, it obviously has implications on whether PSBs can deliver their obligations. And actually, a proxy that we use to try to understand the health of the TV advertising market is by looking at it in the context of display advertising. And actually, what we know is that in 2017, the display ad market had a really challenging year. And TV advertising generally maintains a 30% share of display advertising. And that's been consistent for the last 17 years, plus minus 1%. So some years it goes up to 31%, some years it goes down to 29%. And 2017 was no exception. We are at that 29% mark. So again, we know TV advertising in developed markets goes like this, so it could potentially just be a cyclicality. Now, in the online space, it's a completely different picture, and this hopefully will help us set the discussion for the ad-supported versus paid debate. You can see both are growing at the same time together. SVOD up 35%, online video advertising up 25%. SVOD driven very much by volume. So the price increases that they announced in 2018 didn't really come into effect until December, so we expect 2018 to reflect the pricing changes. So this is very much growth in subscribers. Online video advertising crossed that £1 billion mark for the first time. So it's the size of the commercial multi-channel market, not an insignificant amount. But it is worth noting that the formats there are quite different from TV. So it's a lot of out-of-stream video, for example, so video included in text or in articles or in feed, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully that gives you a very quick whistle-stop tour. We have a lot of data on our website for free because we publish it as a regulator. So I do encourage you to have a look at our interactive data tools. And with that, thank you very much. I'm happy to take one or two questions very quickly, and then I'll invite David on stage. Any questions?
Hi, it was a great presentation. I'm from Canada, and 5 years ago was roughly the last time that the TV ad market grew there, starting to stabilize now. First market that Netflix came to outside of the US. Last fall, viewing declines were double digits. My question for you is whether you think some of the disruption that's being felt in markets like Canada is still ahead of you guys.
That's a very good question. So we definitely look at other markets like the US, like Canada, like Sweden, which I'm hoping Matthias on our panel will address. And you know, it's a very different type of market. So US and Canada, I imagine, very heavy on pay TV. Here in the UK, less so. So in terms of the cannibalization of SVOD, it's a little bit less strong than what we've seen in North America or in Sweden. However, and I'm hoping Matthias can help me, it's not impossible to grow both digital, both SVOD, as well as TV advertising. So it is something we're very much monitoring, making sure that we don't fall into that trap, or if we do, that we're ready for it. But it's by no means definitive that we will.